at the end of the day, even though, we had this limited window and we're kind of like cursing the conditions, like, oh my God, I can't believe all this rain and the water's going discolored and the fishing is terrible. Like, our luck is so bad. This stinks. Maybe in your weakest moments, you're like, why couldn't we have just made some film on a tailwater,
All right, welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Today I'm joined again by my good friends Chase and Aimee of Tight Loops. This episode was actually recorded back in August after a week-long editing session together in Park City. As many of you know, we just released our feature film in collaboration with Tight Loops called Hope in the High Water, which documents a week-long trip with the Tight Loops crew chasing after Yellowstone cutthroat in Wyoming. It was a really, really fun trip. Definitely didn't go how we expected, and yeah, the story just turned out really, really cool. So hope you guys all get a chance to check that out. When we recorded this episode, we had just finished up our week-long editing session together, basically piecing the bone structure together of the actual film. And as creatives, a lot of times we're working alone, and so being able to put our minds together and hear different opinions and just collaborate on this project this week was one of the coolest things that I've been a part of. And this conversation is just a reflection of that week. And you also get to hear some tidbits about the trip and about the film that didn't make the actual film or the end cut. Just some funny BTS stuff that happened along the way. So I think you guys are going to really enjoy the conversation. If you haven't already, go check out Hope in High Water. It is available on our website, wild-fly.com/movie, and we're doing it through a pay what you think is fair model. This basically means you just pay what you can, whether it's $1, $50, $100, whatever you want to spend. So we appreciate that, and let's jump into the conversation.
All right, guys. Bring it in. Round 3.
And we're back.
Here we go. But yeah, this is the third time you guys have been on the podcast. We're here in Park City. For those of you guys tuning in, listening, we got Chase and Aimee from Tight Loops. But this one's a little bit different because our first podcast we ever did was in North Carolina, and it was the first time we got to meet and hang out and just like meet in person. And in that pod, I remember us talking about, we got to do a collab. Like, it'd be so cool to do a collab. This is back in 2020. I don't know what that looks like. Yada, yada, yada. And here we are a couple years later, and we're doing it.
We're doing it.
We're getting it.
We're getting it.
So we just went on a week-long trip in Wyoming and, have a big film that we're working on that we're going to dive into. And yeah, we're sitting here in Park City doing a little production week, which has been really fun.
Living the life of the rich and the famous here in Park City.
That's right. I wish this was ours. This is not ours.
Yeah. All these pillows, not ours.
Yeah. But yeah, catch me up to speed. What's been going on with you guys? You have a little bit of a change, maybe a big change from our last podcast we should probably dive into with your home situation.
Yeah, is that true? Were we still in the van at the last?
We were right at the cusp.
So yeah, the last time when we were in Salt Lake, it was like top secret. Like, I feel like the Wildfly podcast like broke the news of like, we're moving out of the van.
Oh, right, but we hadn't yet done.
We were in the process with the new.
Well, yeah, we're out of the van. We're no longer in the van.
The van is officially sold, actually. The van, Bullwinkle now lives in Wisconsin and lives with a lovely family who I think will be, a great new home. Weekend trips, as the weekender is meant for. So I think no winter driving, well taken care of. Volkswagen guy. He's super excited about the van and yeah.
And they're danglers.
Yeah.
So I think Bullwinkle will continue to see a lot of the same adventures.
Will be on weekend fishing trips for sure.
But yeah, we're out of the van and we're into a big old red-blooded truck.
I mean,
Toyota.
It's Toyota.
Okay, yeah.
Chill.
Normal-blooded Japanese truck. We got a Toyota Tundra. We did a big build out on it, put a camper on the back of it. Long, expensive, complicated process to take a stock truck and turn it into a full-time home. But essentially we're doing the same thing we were doing before. We're still living on the road. We've just changed platforms to something that is a little more reliable and will hopefully keep us doing more of the stuff we want and less time on the ground underneath it working on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, less time worrying about it as well.
And it's already paying dividends because the trip that we recently did all together, it was like an excellent base camp for us to work out of and get us into rough places and have reliable, dry, clean space with power and all the amenities of a home to cook and sleep and do all that kind of stuff. Which, you know, you could host people in the van, but again, as Aimee mentioned, it was a weekender
Scotty,
model.
It would have been real tight in the van though.
Yeah, didn't have as many amenities. Didn't have
Yeah.
a good kitchenette or stove or sink or anything like that. So, or as much capacity to store anything, water or food or whatever. So, we are much better set up now, and we were much better set up for our trip, as you know, because you lived in there with us. So
Yeah, I
the
did.
whole
I got to
time.
test out the bench bed and worked well all week. Yeah, it was great. It was like really cozy and plenty of space. I felt like I wasn't intruding too much,
Yeah.
and maybe I was, but it was comfortable on my end.
You only broke one thing in there.
What did I break? I did break. Broke part of the door. Whoops.
You don't need that. That's fine.
Yeah. But when I originally reached out to you guys in the winter about like let's actually make this happen. Like what should we do? Let's do a collab. Let's
Yeah.
figure something out. You guys still had the van or were in the process of getting
Sure.
the truck, right?
Yeah, the build officially started in September of last year. And being that it was a new truck, we didn't realize coming into the world of new trucks that like getting parts for new vehicles is a bit challenging, and maybe, you know, COVID obviously had like an influence on supply chain stuff as well, but we started the build in September. We're able to do a handful of things to get it ready to receive the flatbed and receive the camper, but we weren't able to like fully do all the things that needed to be done. But in that time period, we flew down to Patagonia. We were doing a bunch of different things. Mainline Overland out in Pennsylvania, they were doing our build on the truck. So we left it with them September, picked it up in November, I think.
Yeah, that seems right.
After we came back from Patagonia, we set up a trip out there, picked up the truck, drove it back across the country, and straight to California. Did we go straight to California? I'm old and my brain is failing.
No, well, we picked it up and it had a flatbed on it. We didn't have a camper yet. We had to drive our old bed to North Carolina.
Yeah, so we drove all of our spare parts, like the standard box on the truck and all the tires and wheels and everything. They stacked it on the flatbed. We drove it to North Carolina. My brother sold all of our spare parts, and then from North Carolina drove straight to California with the flatbed to then receive the camper. The camper was put on in early January, so I guess like December we must have been picking up the truck out in Pennsylvania. It was not a very fun drive cross country, so you know, there's not a ton of space to sleep in a truck in general. Like if you're sleeping in the cab, Chase slept in the front seat, in the passenger seat, and I slept in the back, so I could like actually lay down. And that's what we did the entire cross country trip. So it was like pretty miserable because it was December.
Pretty miserable. Glory days. It's reminiscent of the story I told last time we were on the podcast of sleeping in the front seat of my cabriolet. It was basically the same thing.
It feels so good to never be able to stretch out your legs, especially when you're driving 14 hours a day. It feels so good.
It's all part of it.
So good.
But yeah, obviously, when we drove across the country the final time to get our camper, we didn't have a camper yet. So we were just in double cab is the term for the size of the cab of our truck, but a smaller cab, so it's just front and back seats. So I let Aimee take the back seat so she could actually lay down, and I just sat sat in the passenger seat.
Yeah, I can
every
lay
night
down, but like with my
because
legs scrunched.
you might be asking, why not get a hotel? Well,
'Cause those
because
are
we just spent our
expensive.
life savings building a camper and truck. So we were trying
Any
to be
way you can save money.
Yeah,
really.
trying to be as frugal as possible. So yes, we just slept in the front seat and back seat of our truck in the middle of winter driving across the country, which was fine coming out of North Carolina, but by the time we were getting near the Rockies, it was getting pretty darn cold. But whatever, we made it, got the camper, lived to tell the tale, and yeah, now here we are. We've been in it for 6 months. We drove it straight down to Mexico once we had the camper on and did a couple months in Baja to kind of break it all in and test it out in the nice weather instead of continuing to stay in the snow. But
to break it in and to literally break it.
yeah,
Anyways.
You have to watch the Tight Loops film.
Now that we need to get
Yeah,
into
to
that.
get the
We'll have
full
a film
story.
coming out soon that will
well,
showcase.
I think by the time anyone's watching this, the film should exist. So
Okay.
probably everything we've talked about, you will have already seen in a more condensed and concise retelling in a film.
But you heard it here first.
Yeah, but you heard it here first.
reality.
ladies and gentlemen.
Here's
Yeah.
a rambling retelling.
Yeah, but it was. I mean, bring us back to kind of the start of when we started working on this project, because we didn't really know what we wanted. We were like, oh, maybe we go to Alaska, maybe we go whatever, and we wanted to do something, some sort of adventure together, but we didn't really know where to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that you've been talking about in your new Fly Cup series is sort of this idea that for us as filmmakers, I think for you and then also for us, there's this feeling like every time we make something, we got to kind of like one up ourselves, and especially for us working on a collaboration for the first time, which there's been a lot of interest and sort of like pressure from the public, like you guys need to team up and make a film. I think we all wanted to do something big, like that's what seemed like was necessary if we were going to do a collaboration. Like it couldn't just be let's meet up and go fishing or whatever. It's like if we're going to combine powers, like we got to go big with it or whatever. So certainly we spent a long time thinking about what that was going to look like and what that could be. And I think big is kind of different for everyone, so big for us, maybe since we've done a bunch of like big backcountry and international trips, would be like an even bigger backcountry international trip or something. But we're kind of trying to look at like, what could we do that would be new for you, or that something that you would do that'd be new for us. And like, you hadn't done a ton of like backcountry overnight backpacking and camping. So we kind of decided to like scale down the idea of, an exotic trip or something, to just do something closer to home, but that would be new or big or different for you. And something that like we were relatively comfortable with, so we could kind of like, I don't know what the right word is. I don't want to say like chaperone the trip, but like guide you in, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like be like mentor you into something that's like super special to us, and would be kind of new for you, and that'd be like a fun way to collaborate.
Yeah, and an area that like is really special to us.
Yeah.
That we've spent a decent amount of time in, but it's still like exciting for us.
Yeah,
to
which
go
is
back
cool
to.
because it's not something that we often. Well, working individually, like we make films by ourselves, or you make films by yourselves, you don't ever get the opportunity to like share those things with other people. We share them with everyone via our films, but we don't get to share them in real time with our friends. So that's just like if you're going to be doing something collaborative, it's just like great opportunity to be able to share something that's special to you with someone else. So,
And I feel like something that was special to both of us and like very on brand with what we're into, right? Obviously, we love chasing native species. We love fishing on foot, or like a little bit of an adventure, potentially a backpacking trip, some sort of overnight in the backcountry, which we'll get into all this. But the original plan was to do a big backpacking trip in this new area for all of us. It's like you guys had been in parts of Wyoming, and I really haven't spent much time in Wyoming at all. But the original plan being we wanted to do this big backpacking trip.
Yeah,
right.
I mean,
So yeah,
for you, that was already on like the bucket list of places you wanted to see.
yeah. So that was kind of like the perfect combination of what I was talking about earlier. Is like, let's do something that's new for Scotty in terms of format, but then new for us in terms of area. So it wasn't just like, oh, we'll just go, repeat something we've done before, but get to go with you or whatever. We wanted to have an element of excitement for us too. And so, yeah, we had a specific area in Wyoming that we've been looking at on the map for a long time. There's not a ton of information out there, but what little information we could gather from people we know who've been in the area, it's the kind of place you want to see at some point in your life. So we were pretty excited about that, and we kind of planned this like basically week-long, depending on how many side quests we went on, 20 to 40 mile long circuit where we would camp out for probably 5 nights or something and film. And it was, pursuing Yellowstone cutthroat in northwest Wyoming. And that was all looking good. We had the whole itinerary planned. We'd done the research. Everyone had put away the time to go do it. And then we got hung up logistically in pulling permits to be able to actually shoot the film about it. And for those who are uninitiated, who are watching, there's all sorts of different permitting. You need to do all kinds of different things on American public land, and particularly on federal land, which is generally more restrictive than state land. I think probably most people are familiar because it's been kind of a hot button issue with like the national parks filming and photography permits in the last couple of years. That kind of broke through to the mainstream, but it's true outside of the national parks too. We weren't going to be in a national park. We were just going to be in national forest land. And you'd need to get a special use permit to be able to do anything commercial. And in our case, because YouTube videos are monetized, because we have sponsors putting money towards projects, making the films that we make counts as a commercial use. So that's not a big deal. Generally, the process is pretty easy to pull a permit. You state your case, you fill out some forms, they tell you how much it's going to cost, you pay them, and you get your permit. And that's all good. I think in rare circumstances, the Forest Service might decide that they're not interested in issuing you a permit, but for the most part on national forest land, it's no big deal. However, within the national forest, and this can be true in national parks and other types of federal land, but for us it was national forest, there are additional designations for certain areas, more primitive areas, one of which is federally designated wilderness. So some people might be familiar with wilderness areas because they're labeled as such, the blank wilderness area or whatever, but also within something that would just be labeled as the national forest, or within Yellowstone National Park, there are designated areas of wilderness that you might otherwise not know they're wilderness unless you looked closely at the map or checked whatever. So the area we wanted to hike into, and the case is that like pretty much the point of the film was to get away from the road and get remote. Most places on public land where you can get significantly far away from the road are designated wilderness, and that's kind of, they go hand in hand. The point of designating an area as wilderness is to keep it as primitive as possible. Part of designated wilderness's designation is that there can be no roads there. So a lot of the places where you'd want to go on long hikes and camp, most of the places you think of in Colorado, the Maroon Bells Wilderness, or the High Sierra in California, or any of these areas you'd be thinking of like carrying a backpack in and camping are all wilderness areas. The wilderness areas permitting process is far more restrictive than just standard national forest, and it's for good reason. In trying to maintain the natural raw beauty of wilderness areas, they have to be a little more restrictive of what they allow people to do there. National forest, BLM land are designated for mixed use, which can be all sorts of things. It could be ATV riding, it could be cattle grazing, it could be whatever. They're there for all sorts of different people to use in all sorts of different ways, but really wilderness areas are designed just to remain primitive and untouched for recreation being very, very low impact recreation. Can't use any motorized vehicles. You can't even bring a bicycle in because it counts as mechanical transport.
You can bring horses, though.
You can bring horses, which is an interesting twist. But in general, it's just for low impact use by people to just enjoy wilderness for the sake of wilderness, just
To
for the,
protect it, which makes
for the
total
raw,
sense.
raw beauty of nature. In order to secure a permit, there are they do issue permits for commercial use. Outfitting with horses or otherwise is one of those things that they issue permits for. So it's not impossible to get a permit to film in the wilderness, but it certainly falls under more scrutiny, and it's not good enough to just say, because we want to make a film. They actually are going to look at your request and demand that you meet certain criteria in making a film. And the criteria are all very related to the sort of ethos of wilderness areas. They need to make sure that essentially the only reason you're making a film is in support of the wilderness area to begin with, has some sort of educational angle to it and informing the public about wilderness and supporting wilderness. And the big thing that we got hung up on was that you had to prove that there was no reasonable alternative outside of wilderness. In other words, we had to show that we couldn't make this film unless it was in a wilderness area. So if there's any other place we could make it and it would be more or less the same, somewhere else on national forest, somewhere else on public land, then no go in the wilderness. Like, you only make films in the wilderness if there's absolutely no other possible place you could make them, and then they meet the other criteria, which, you know, for our film, we thought was kind of a shoo-in. We were pretty confident that we had a good case for it. And at this point, it kind of doesn't matter to argue the fact whether we did or we didn't. The Forest Service didn't agree with us. They felt that we could tell this story somewhere else, which, you know, we disagree with. I disagree with.
Yeah.
We were trying to tell a story.
Yeah, being that it was about that wilderness area.
Yeah, we were trying to tell a very specific story about a very specific river system that has the most genetically robust population of Yellowstone cutthroat left anywhere in the country. That is very unique to that place. You can't really tell the story about this population of fish somewhere else because that population of fish doesn't exist anywhere else but right there. They basically told us we should just go film on some other river and then sort of reference the river that we wanted to hike on, and then that would be good enough for us as filmmakers, which, you know.
I think there's also a big distinction with how the system is set up, even for national forest permits, which are more accessible to get. We got permits for this film, but like it's such an outdated system, and I think it's geared towards bigger Hollywood productions. Like, you're filling out the permit, it's like, what props are you bringing in? How many crew members? Like, blah, blah, blah. It's asking all these questions, and it's like, hey, we're just running in there with our mirrorless cameras. Like, we're not leaving really any impact.
Right. Our impact in producing the film is no different than our impact in just hiking, which anyone can go do, and we could go do freely without permits. It's just as soon as, you know, we press record. And interestingly enough, as you said, the rules are archaic and confusing enough that it applies particularly for moving images, for video, and not even for still photography. Every area is a little bit different, but for the most part, I'd say 90% of places, commercial photography, still photography is allowed without a permit, whereas motion picture taking is. So, you know, the difference between something being high impact in their eyes is like what dial you've set your camera to. You know?
1 frame versus 24 frames a
How many
second.
frames you're capturing a second.
As we've gotten into the very granular
Yeah.
details of this and what it means and arguing about that.
And it's tricky, you know. We spent a ton of time on the phone and over email with the Forest Service trying to work this out, and I think everyone is sympathetic to what's going on, but they do have a objective and a job to do, and they have a set of guidelines that have been handed down to them by an administration and administrations before that and administrations before that, and it's really their job to just sort of try and follow the letter of the law. It's really, really tough because as individuals, we always want leniency and go, hey, I understand why these rules exist, but like, you know, not for me, you know, I'm different than everybody else.
Yeah.
But they're managing big areas with lots of people. So there's precedent that gets set. You know, if they start getting kind of wishy-washy about their stance with one person, then the next people who show up go, but hey, you let them do this. And now they've got, a legitimate argument for, well, they let them do that. I guess we got to let, it's a slippery slope in their eyes anyway, and probably a little bit in reality. But yeah, for us, the unfortunate thing was we got shut down. And yeah, I don't know that it's entirely fair, but again, there's nothing we can do about it at this point. They were pretty clear about, or they were pretty decisive in their decision. Of course, essentially what we ended up doing was pivoting and making a film around the periphery of the wilderness boundary, and it's not that you get wild country within the wilderness and the second you cross back into standard national forests, it all goes to shit, and there's cars and houses everywhere. There's plenty of raw and rough and beautiful country outside of the wilderness areas. So we pivoted our project from sort of being this one kind of epic journey up into the mountains, point to point along this single river, to sort of sample a bunch of rivers in the area, which of course the headwaters of all those rivers exist within wilderness areas. Some of the most exciting stuff probably could have been hiking deep into those wilderness areas, but like I said, there was still plenty of incredible country to cover and things to see outside. So we sort of ended up targeting multiple rivers within public land outside of the wilderness boundary. And we got our permits. They were quick and happy to issue us those permits. It wasn't that they were, trying to shut us down and turn us away from making a film. They just couldn't grant us permission to do it in the wilderness, which of course, because everything with the federal government is so slow, we started the process of trying to get these permits months and months and months before. And again, like I said, we were confident we're going to get them, we've got a good case. Like, I've read all the requirements. I think we meet all the requirements. This should just be a formality, just paperwork to fill out, and we're in. So we planned this whole trip, and we bought all this gear, and we were all, we were packing food to get ready for this long backpack, etc. Like, we were ready to go. And
it really came down to the wire here.
Yeah. Like a week and a half.
Maybe like less than a week.
Yeah. Before we were going to leave, we got the final no. And so we had to pivot quick. I mean, we debated just scrapping the whole project and just doing something, regrouping and trying to figure out something for next year.
I think initially, because we had been so set on this trip, it was kind of discouraging. It was like, oh man, like, we wanted to do this trip.
It like really took the wind out of our sails. Like, we had planned for this one thing, and we had been talking about it for so long, and we had such a clear vision, I guess, for the project, that like compromising that vision felt like no, like there's no way we can do this. But then also, like, I think we got off the phone once we finally had like the definitive, like, this is not happening, like, no. And we all were like, okay, like, I guess we're not doing this at all. Like, we're gonna have to figure out something else. Like, what else are we gonna do? Maybe this is gonna be for next year. And then I think, at least for Chase and I, like, sitting with the idea of, like, we're not doing anything now. Like, this trip that we've been looking forward to for how long, we're not going to do it at all now. Like, that doesn't really seem acceptable either. So that's when, like, everyone, like, kicked it into high gear to figure out, like, how do we make something out of this that we're, like, none of us want to give up on the idea of, like, going fishing together and making something happen. So...
Yeah, I think that was a key thing too. We just realized we could pout and like be discouraged about this situation, but at the end of the day, like, the most important thing was for us to just get out and like go fishing together, spend a week in the woods together, away from people, and just have a fun time. And I think I don't want like any of this to like take away from the project, because I'm really proud of what's come with what we're about to start talking about. And it kind of, the whole pivoting thing leads into like our whole trip. But yeah, I think it was just a
series of unfortunate events.
a series of pivots. But we certainly were like, oh man, this is a bummer. But I think when we finally realized, like, no, we're still doing this. Like, this is gonna be fun. We're gonna make it work. Then it was like, okay. And then we get there, and I was like, this is sick.
Yeah, it was a real roller coaster for a couple days there.
It's just a different set of challenges that goes into making these films. There's so many logistics, that there was going to be a gazillion logistical challenges anyway. Trying to make a film in the backcountry is just a hard thing to do. And then having to, the whole side of it of like being told you're just not even allowed to do it. It's like this whole other hurdle you have to overcome. And then we had a new set of challenges, which is like, with no time to figure out what to do, like, how do we salvage this and make a different trip? And yeah, obviously what we got into was epic. So, you know, it all worked out. And yeah, it was a lesson in expectation. And then the whole trip ended up being a lesson in expectation.
Another lesson.
Yeah.
Here, one sec. I got a little crow went through me. All right, we're back from our bathroom break.
And we're back
Wow.
again.
So much relief.
Yeah.
None of us went to the bathroom before this.
I feel like we all did. Or just sucking down so many seltzers.
Yeah.
It's an unstoppable force.
We haven't gone to the
Of
bathroom
urine.
since we left for Wyoming
Yeah.
weeks ago.
Exactly. Yeah, so, you know, we had to shift gears a little bit, and, you know, the three of us was the plan, you know, to go into this trip. But we're like, if we're going to do this right, we got to have one more guy come along with us. So we obviously called up our boy Phelps, Will Phelps, and he came along to film and just be like the head of filming. Because I think one of the goals was, although we are filmmakers, all of us,
Mhm.
we did want to like really be in the experience. And having gone on the trip now, how crucial it was to have Will to capture some of the moments that unfolded that we might not have captured
Yeah.
if we were trying to film.
And I think we talked about going into it too, like, we were going to be characters in this film. It was going to be about our experience out fishing together. And when you put a bunch of filmmakers together, it's just a bunch of people with cameras filming each other the whole time. And it was like, what do we do if what we're so used to doing at all time is like all of us filming?
camera,
Like,
yeah.
who's in front of the camera? Like, if we're all the behind the camera people, who's going to be in front of it? So yeah, we needed to consolidate. And certainly, you know, we didn't never touch the camera. We had our cameras with us, and we pulled them out every now and again to get stuff. But really, Will was the driving force. And it feels very strange, honestly, not to have William with us here now, because he was such a essential part of the crew.
Yeah.
You know?
We'll have to do another pod this winter or something. Yeah, we'll all go up to Montana, hang out with Will.
Yeah, because of course no one, you know, outside of maybe some behind the scenes stuff, no one's going to get to see Will as a character in this film. He really was manning the camera behind the whole time. He was sort of like our one-man production team, but he was so essential to everything, to the decision making, to the morale, to everything. I mean, it was a 4-person crew, although, you know, you'll only see 3 of them on camera. He didn't get to fish, but
You got to fish after.
yeah.
But yeah, I think also aside from Will being like a really talented filmer and creator, he's just such a good attitude about life and just such a crusher. He's always getting it.
Yeah.
And I think having that kind of person on a trip like this, where there were a lot of ups and downs, there were a lot of times where we were just getting discouraged. He had a very positive outlook. Guys, like, keep with it. It might happen. It might happen. Stick with it. I think having that was like huge for us to stay in the trip.
Yeah, and I think so too, because we'll get into this, but and I also want to preface by saying, you know, even though we had to pivot on this project, I think what we ended up getting was probably better than what we would have gotten if this had gone the way we wanted it to initially. I think the experience and the story and the film that we came up with in the end was vastly superior to us just going on a nice hiking trip and, you know, having everything go the way we expected it to go. So, but yeah, we'll get into it, but we got beat down in a lot of different ways throughout the course of this trip. And when it's the pressure as filmmakers to make this collaborative piece is really on the 3 of us. And so if no one else was there to boost morale and we were getting knocked down and we're starting to get discouraged, like, oh my God, like, first we have to pivot. Now what we've pivoted to isn't working and this film's never going to come together. It would have been really easy, I think, for all of us to fold kind of in on ourselves in despair. But Will didn't have that pressure, because at the end of the day, he's sort of just like the camera for hire. Like, it's not his name on the thing. It's not the expectation for him to like make this great collaborative film that we've been looking forward to, and the expectations are high. So he was able to just sort of be this like outside force who could kind of, I don't know, maybe take a step back, have a little bit more perspective, and any time like we were starting to get down, he could pick us up, you know, which I think was really good.
Yeah, and I think something that's been tough for me over the last year has been like giving up some control. You know, I think we have both faced this where you're doing everything, right? You're the editor, you're the filmer, you're the producer, you're the music scorer. You're doing all of the jobs. And, you know, Sam over here is not in camera. He's been working for me for now a year, and he's helped out tremendously when it comes to editing.
Has anyone even seen? Is Sam real?
Who is
Has anyone
Sam?
even seen him?
I don't know, dude. But I think that like giving up some control in the editing of like running through all the selects, like it might not be perfect how I might have done it, but it's like it's saving a lot of like mental bandwidth. And over the course of the year, he's gotten a lot better at it. And so the same goes with this trip. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be the guy filming and getting everything. Are we going to be getting the shots?
Yeah, I mean, you almost wonder, like, is there anything there? Like, do we have anything?
Yeah,
like,
do we have
until
everything?
you sit down and look at it, you're like, what?
Right.
You got to kind of trust. Like, okay,
happened?
Sam,
Yeah.
like, or Will's got
Yeah.
it. You know, like he's a professional. He's going to get the stuff, and he does films fly fishing. So
Yeah.
that was, I think, good for all of us. So we could, like, give up some control and just be like, shit, let's figure this fishing thing out.
Yeah, and the great part too is that Will really is like the consummate pro. You know, he's so good at what he does that any nerves we might have had like on day 1 or 2 going into it, like getting to review some of the selects at the end of the day, it was like, oh, okay. Like I don't even need to be saying,
Yeah.
hey, Will, like make sure you're getting this or what. Like he's just on it. Always
Yeah,
on
I
it.
mean, there was just, like, right off rip, just a very natural flow to everything. I mean, it was our first time meeting Will, but obviously had been, like, in communication with him for how long? Someone that we'd always wanted
Years.
to meet. So it was, very comfortable.
I would say to the point where like because this was such a sort of physically demanding trip that we ended up being on, he kind of like held our feet to the fire and like kept us on task at times where like we're all getting tired. We maybe just want to like pack it in for the day. And he's like, hey, putting the camera in our face, being like, tell us what's going on here. You know, like even at points where, yeah, we might have blown it if it was just us,
Totally.
you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to you,
pressure.
Will. If you're listening to this or watching this, you crushed
Well, you better
it.
be listening to this.
Well, we're getting it.
We're in the pocket.
Yeah, I think last thing on this, I just think it was like for me personally really exciting to bring all of us together because I had met you guys, Will and I are homies, and I was like, I know we were all going to get along, and fortunately we did, and that was just so fun having all of us together for a week,
Yeah.
and I don't know, just being around creative people and being around people who like can push you is amazing, and you don't always get that in our world because it's such a niche thing that we do, and we're all in different places, so that was awesome.
Yep.
But to dive into the trip, we still wanted to do an epic trip around Wyoming, chasing Yellowstone cutthroat, of fish that I had maybe caught, you know, once or twice before. And I think, you know, shout out to the films that you guys have done, especially for Wild's sake, really bringing light on native species and like, I guess, almost taking a macro, like zoomed out scope of the whole thing. Cause you know, growing up even you're thinking like, oh, Montana, big brown trout, big rainbow trout, whatever, like there's cutthroat in the West. But I think actually zooming out and thinking about, you say this in the interview of like, what are these fish? How did they get here? Oh, they were placed here 200 years ago by Europeans. What were there before? Oh, cutthroat, the fish that were like native to this region. So having like, I think that gave me a deeper appreciation for native species and like the why of like, why are we chasing after this fish and the
Right.
connection to the environment. So that's something that I was really excited to explore and fish for, but also to tell that story. Because I think it is so ingrained in our culture of just like, oh, brown trout out west, like whatever, still fun to catch, but they're not supposed to be there, you know?
Right.
It's like a very conflicting thing now that I think you said this in your interview, like the veil is on, or the curtain is like
Right.
open
Lifted,
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, for us, okay, so you've got a species of fish in the West called the cutthroat. It's the native sort of trout of the Rocky Mountains. Up until recently, we would have said, science would have told us that there's 14 extant subspecies of cutthroat spread across the Rocky Mountains. Now the more recent science is calling for maybe upwards of 26, 27 subspecies of cutthroat. But one of those primary subspecies is the Yellowstone cutthroat. And I think that we think that the Yellowstone cutthroat is sort of like the quintessential American cutthroat species. When I think of the American West and the Rocky Mountains, I think the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, Yellowstone National Park, is kind of its crown jewel. It's the most iconic landscape in the American West. And at the heart of that landscape is the Yellowstone cutthroat. It is the fish. It's a keystone species for the area, ecologically, but then also as anglers, you'd be hard pressed to find a more iconic symbol of the West in my mind. So if you're somebody who loves trout, who loves fly fishing in the West, I think that the Yellowstone cutthroat should be your fish, above anything else. And it certainly is for us, which is why we wanted to, if we were going to make like a native cutthroat film or a native fish of the West film, like I couldn't think of a better candidate than the Yellowstone cutthroat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just understanding the significance of it to the environment too. Like not just it's a fun fish to catch. It's supposed to be there. It's like
right.
The otters rely on it. The grizzly bears, the eagles, like the whole environment is reliant on this fish.
Yeah, it almost all kind of revolves around it. I mean, Yellowstone Lake, which is in the heart of Yellowstone National Park, in the headwaters of the Yellowstone River, is like the densest population of native trout anywhere in the West. There's historically millions of fish, and we had a big hiccup with lake trout in the 90s, and that plummeted significantly. They're back on the rise again now. But it's basically the upper Yellowstone watershed is the greatest stronghold left still in the country for native trout. There's some other areas that are close, but it's the greatest concentration that we have left. So we really wanted to focus on that area. And, as we talked about permitting issues, making films, we wanted to stay clear of the park itself. Though the park probably would have been easier than the wilderness areas to get permits. It's also kind of, there's plenty of media around the park. We've made films in the park before, et cetera, et cetera. For a minute there, you didn't even need permits a couple of years ago to film in the park. You do again now. But anyway, I think for a lot of people, when they think of Yellowstone, they think of Yellowstone cutthroat, their vision of that really revolves around the borders of the park. But the actual range of that fish and also that whole greater Yellowstone ecosystem the borders extend far beyond those of the park. So there's a lot of really rugged, remote, beautiful areas to access and find those fish outside of the borders of the park. And so that's where we wanted to focus on for this film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we rolled in. Will flew into Salt Lake, linked up with me, and we drove up and met you guys. And that going into that first day, we were just stoked. Like, it was good weather, things were looking good. We were rolling into the mountains, and we got to see sunset, and we're like, this is it. We're in the spot, cutthroat country. It's going to go off. And very soon after us getting out on the water that first day, things changed a little bit.
Yeah, well, and I guess we should preface by saying that, like, when we had to pivot and we weren't going to do this backpack in this area that was new to all of us, we're kind of like, well, let's look at a couple key areas that we could, hit and try and tell a story that revolves around, generally the same watershed, but multiple drainages of it, et cetera. And so we kind of thought like the safest way to do it would be to hit like a couple areas that Aimee and I have fished before. And so we kind of like knew what to expect and would be good. Because, the thing with the backpacking trip was like, even if the fishing wasn't good, it's going to be an epic backpacking trip. Like, there'd be a great story there. It'd be incredible landscape. It's going to be an epic journey no matter what. Mm-hmm. Without being able to do that journey, we're like, we need to make sure that, like, wherever we do go is going to deliver in some way. So we're like, we'll have some safety locations, and then we'll go check out some locations that, like, again, none of us have ever been to, which, we couldn't vet other than what little information we could glean from speaking with other people or tiny bits of literature that exist out there about them. So, we're like, we're going to start the trip off right. We're going to take a little tour of the classics. We're going to go to these spots that we know are super productive and for us in our history, like super iconic. We're kind of going to ease into the trip, and it'll get more adventurous as time goes on. We'll get farther and farther out of like our comfort zone of knowledge and experience in the area. So that was like the idea. But then of course these places that we thought were like total gimmies, like this is, you know, we're trying to give our friends a tour of an area to give them this experience of, you know, fishing for Yellowstone cutthroat that we've been hyping up for months. Like this is going to be the best. They were not the best. Part of that was that they were fishing kind of tough, just generally, you know, we weren't seeing the size and numbers of fish that we had seen years ago, the last time we had been there, which on its own would have been like kind of a letdown, you know, because we were expecting it to be one way and it wasn't. But then also the weather was just horrendous. And this is mid to late August in Wyoming. This is like sunshine, dry time in the American West. You know, you're never, the only weather you're concerned about is like how much sunscreen do you have to wear and like how hot is the water going to be? Like, do we need to fish early? That's the kind of stuff you're thinking about this time. Like, are the water levels going to be low or not? And, you know, it'd been a good water year in much of that area. So a lot of those concerns went out of the way. So we're like, oh, this is going to be great. It's going to be fishing, you know, as good as late July, and there's going to be lots of bugs and water, and it's going to be sunny and dry flies for days. And then it was just like an absolute slugfest of rain and mud and cold temperatures and wind, and it never let up. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into the granular details here, but basically the entire week we were fighting against the weather.
All right, we had a little technical difficulty. We're blaming Sam.
Yeah, it's his name is Sam.
But yeah, keep going on. I think we're talking about the struggle.
Oh yeah, I think I was saying that it wasn't, when I say that like the weather was bad or the weather was unseasonable, it wasn't just like, oh, the weather was cold and it was like raining a little bit. This was like deluge rain, rivers reaching flood stage, completely unfishable, and in many cases quite dangerous.
Yeah,
you know, and we never expected it, and no one else that we ran into in the area knew what to say about it either. You know, this is really, really unusual for that area. It's not the kind of thing where it's like, well, you never know this time of year if you plan a trip. There's no reason to think that we would see this much water this time of year. And of course, it was basically just the week that we had planned to do the trip. It was great up until that point, and the weather got great afterwards. For a 1 week period, the skies really, really opened up and gave us, a real run for our money. Let alone trying to make a film with camera gears out in the wet and whatever, you know, it just became unfishable. You know what I mean? Especially if you're trying to make a fishing film, that was the wrong time to do it. But those were the cards we were dealt. So
exactly. And I think it's just like a lesson that gets reinforced more and more that we do these trips. Because we do this a lot compared to maybe the average Joe, and so we know how good it can be, and you guys know how good the areas we went could be, and so you have this expectation of like, I know how good this has been in the past. Why is it not like that? And so anything that's lower than that, you're just like, damn. You know, anyone who's a new angler that might have gone on the first couple of days might have still been like, this is incredible. So I think that was a big lesson that I've been trying to like take into everything in my life, but especially going into these trips, your expectations have to be almost toned down a little bit, and then you got to just deal with what nature throws at you, you know, especially when you're making a film. It's like that's all part of the story. You got to trust the process.
Yeah, I suppose like in those moments you're like, this is not how it's supposed to happen. This isn't what I had in mind. Like this wasn't the vision. This isn't it. But yeah, kind of like reining it back in and realizing like this is just part of the process. It becomes the story, I guess.
Well, yeah, and I think in the end that story is kind of like a microcosm of life for a lot of anglers. You know, Wyoming is famously the least or most sparsely populated state in the country, right? So very few people actually live in and around Yellowstone cutthroat country. So if you're coming to fish for Yellowstone cutthroat or hike in those mountains or see the parks or whatever, you're probably traveling, which means it's probably a vacation or something, and you've set time aside, and that's the time you have set aside. So I think anyone can relate to this idea of like, well, shit, I planned my week-long vacation last July to be on these dates, and I showed up and it's raining the whole time. Like, what am I going to do? You know? And that was kind of the same thing for us, where it's like, this was the time that we have. We can't just stay another week or come back the week afterwards. We all have busy schedules. So what can we do to make the best of it? You know? So yeah, I think in the end, it's a story that probably a more relatable story than we thought it was going to be. In that, you know, I think it's a pretty common experience for people to plan some trip around something and then not have the conditions they were hoping for that trip. And like, what do? You just go home, you know, or sit on your hands the whole time. And that's not what we did, you know. We stuck with it and tried to make the best out of it. And the best was pretty crummy for a lot of it. But when there were high moments and silver linings, they were just so much sweeter, you know?
Yeah, I remember being towards the end there, I was so set on like, you know, we're just going to have to come back at the end of the month and it's going to be, you're just going to have to wait it out and then come back and fish it. And again, like I think you and Will were just like, nah, dude, stick with it. Let's check the creek. Let's see if it's good. And, you know, the window that we end up having there is in the film. I don't want to spoil too much, but it's like, it's not at all what we expected. But it was like after it happened and we fished for this little window, I think Will was like, dude, we got it. Like that was it. I was like, oh my gosh, that was it.
I think we all had kind of like given up on the expectation at that point. Like, this isn't going to work. It's over. Like, whatever. Like, there's no harm in going out and checking all these things. And then like the last day that we went out and we fished and then like things turned on and things changed for us. But, we had all, I think been pushed past the point of like, there's redemption here. Like, no, this is toast. And maybe, you know, in letting go of that expectation and getting to that point, it was just made it the experience what it was. I don't know. Yeah.
And I should say, without giving away too much, you know, the kind of the big picture of our trip was that, you know, we had all these different locations and we arrived at the first location and things aren't quite as good. The weather gets really bad. Instead of just hanging around and being beaten down by the weather and the bad fishing, we're like, all right, let's move location. And again, all these locations, because we're pursuing a particular native fish that's native to a, you know, relatively small area, they're all going to be kind of close to each other. Most weather systems, although could be isolated in the mountains, this was not an isolated system. It was like the whole area was just going to get rain nonstop. But we were so, you know, optimistic going into it, so fresh, that we're like, oh, I'm sure if we just head to the next spot, like it'll be better. And get to the next spot, it's not better. If anything, it's worse. You know,
I feel like we were all just ignoring all of the facts that were being presented. We were like looking at the weather, pulling up charts, looking at things on like firing up the Starlink so we can look at the computer to like look at weather systems, and then just making completely deranged, like, let's just drive to the next river. Maybe it'll be fine over there. And like looking at as the crow flies, like there's no way that it's going to be better over there. But we were just like, let's go. Like we just needed something to hold on to.
Yeah.
Right? Like something to be grasping at, and like being in motion felt better than sitting around being like,
for sure,
we're done for, you know, like I feel like there's so many points where, clearly we're just like really hoping for the impossible.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, if you've ever been like burned multiple times by like an unreliable friend or something, where it's like, oh, we just love these areas so much and we love fishing so much that we just keep coming back and being like, all right, like one more chance, I'll trust you this time, like I'm sure it'll be better. And then it's so much worse again. And every time that happened, we just became like a little less confident, a little more beaten down, to the point where by the end of it we just like just given up. We were just like completely downtrodden. We didn't have the energy to like get our hopes up again, you know, because we kept doing it so many times, letting our hopes get up just to have them crushed.
And there wasn't any signs of things getting better. No. That was the other thing.
Well, no, things were just getting worse, I think, like progressively worse.
Right. And, you know, things didn't look bad leading up to it. You know?
I feel like I remember checking the weather and being
Yeah.
like, oh, that's kind of annoying that like
Oh, there's going to be
the
some
day
rain.
that we're supposed to like get together, like the next day, I think I remember saying to you like, oh, there's supposed to be like some thunderstorms or something.
Right.
And I was like, that's a bummer. But you know, you're like thunderstorms in the West in the summer, like they're quick moving, they can be kind of intense, but you don't think like, oh no, it's gonna rain and be thunderstorms and like flood stage whatever for 7 days straight.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
You know?
my point is that things were changing rapidly.
Oh, yeah.
So we kept
Very
thinking, well,
rapidly.
if they could change to get worse, they could change to
They
get better.
can totally
too,
get
you know?
better.
Like, you never know. Like,
Yeah.
maybe we're going to wake up tomorrow and the forecast is going to be great. And every day we woke up, the forecast just got so much worse.
Yeah.
The takeaway from the whole experience is just sort of this idea of perspective. You know, if you go out and have a good day of fishing and that was your whole experience, you just got up, you had a great breakfast and you rolled out and the weather was nice and the fish were feeding and you caught a bunch of nice fish, and you know, that's great. That's a wonderful day. You'll go, man, today was a good day. And by tomorrow you've already forgotten it. But when you've been absolutely beaten down for 5 days straight in the wet and the cold and the mud, and you get a good day like that, you're going to remember that day for the rest of your life, just from the perspective of it, you know? I think that was what was so beautiful about this trip. I'm never going to forget that day we had.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and it's cool because we've all been on like some pretty epic trips before.
Sure.
And not to say like this one was awesome and epic in its own ways, but you just are always comparing it to like
Sure.
something else, you know? But like again, the perspective thing shifts your perspective no matter if you're on a small creek in North Carolina or like on the Yellowstone in the National Park. Like you can have an equal cool opportunity or equal cool moment if you
Right.
no matter what, like even if it's like, oh, you catch a big Yellowstone cutthroat or you catch a small brookie, they can be equally cool
Yeah.
just in their own way.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that was really cool in reflecting on this, I don't know how much this will make in the film, but I'm curious for you to talk about this a little more, of just like fishing a Freestone Creek, Freestone River is so much different than a
Sure.
tailwater. And I don't think that perspective really hit until maybe after this as much, of how many tailwaters are actually in the West and across the country.
Sure.
I mean, like, you know, there's the film Damnation out there that Patagonia has made. It talks about dams, but it never really clicked for me, you know, about what these are like curated, human curated
Mm-hmm.
places almost with
Yeah.
the tailwaters.
Yeah, I mean, they're not, you know, the primary purpose of most of the dams in this country certainly weren't to create good fishing habitat, but it's certainly what they did, essentially, by creating predictable, reliable stream flows and temperatures. So, you know, most of the most famous, I shouldn't say most of the most famous, but a large percentage of the most famous rivers in the West that people think of when they think of iconic trout fisheries that people travel from all over the world to fish are tailwaters. And that's because the water stays cold and at a certain level all year round, and bugs love that. So there's plentiful insect hatches. So there's lots of food available for fish. So fish grow big and fat and happy, and all the kind of seasonal uncertainty that you get in a Freestone River. Gets too hot in late summer, the water flows get too low, the water flows too high in early spring. None of those are a factor. You can fish that river the same in July as you can in December, and the fish are always there and the fish are always feeding, which purely as an angler is great. You know, what more could you ask for? You know, dependable, reliable fishing. You can go out and catch a bunch of fish every day. And I think we've all enjoyed the fruits of that. You know, I enjoy going to fish tailwaters, even for non-native fish, because the fishing's great. What's not to love about great fishing? But I think something we are looking to do on this trip, and something Aimee and I think you as well, are just looking to do more and more in our lives, doesn't just revolve around where we can find the best fishing. We're looking for a more holistic experience outside, and I think those experiences revolve around wild, natural state of things. And part of the wild, natural state of things is that it's not steady and consistent. Nature is dynamic and sometimes violent and tumultuous. And that means that some days, some seasons, fishing is not going to be good. Rivers are going to be in a constant state of change, and that change isn't always going to be favorable for angling. So, at the end of the day, even though, we had this limited window and we're kind of like cursing the conditions, like, oh my God, I can't believe all this rain and the water's going discolored and the fishing is terrible. Like, our luck is so bad. This stinks. Maybe in your weakest moments, you're like, why couldn't we have just made some film on a tailwater, Because we were getting our butts handed to us so much. That is like, it's easy to forget that that's the reason you love those places to begin with. If it wasn't a possibility for something like that to happen, it wouldn't be this rugged, beautiful place that we fell in love with in the first place, So I think the lazy, selfish side of us wanted to be like, we want to go into a really wild place and then have it easy, because why wouldn't everybody likes to have it easy? But in the end, we went into a wild place and we had a wild time,
Yeah.
And I think, in the end, that's way radder.
I think those are the experiences that we both seek out now, more so, is like the wild experience.
Right. And again, it's perspective, even now in isolation, like next time we're back in that area, if you just have a great day that starts and ends in a great day, you're going to appreciate that so much more. Because again, we're talking about beforehand how tough it was to have bad conditions because we know how good it could be. Yeah. Now we're going to know how bad it could be too. I feel like we took for granted how good our early experiences were there. Never again, man. Next time I'm there, if the conditions are good, I'm going to be, thanking my lucky stars that it's not worse. And we saw it bad, and I bet it could get even worse than that. But yeah, that's actually like a primary part of the experience, because otherwise it would just be any old other day fishing, and we've got a lot of places closer to home in much easier to get to, less dangerous, more predictable places, where if the whole point was just to go have good fishing, plenty of great places to do that in the West,
It's a good week for the soul too, just to be out there.
Totally.
Having to, like, the days when it was raining, we had to just sit in the camper. Like, it was just so nice to not have anything to do or nowhere to be. Because with running a business and like being a filmmaker and like we are all running our own businesses, there's always something to do, and you always can occupy yourself. It is very hard also living in the city. You have to be so intentional about making time to just chill and like not be doing something or feeling like you have to be productive. And so that was like a internal battle, I felt like, throughout the whole trip. Again, more of like letting go and just being, and just, I don't know, the week was like so nourishing for my summer, personally. Yeah, good.
Totally. And I think we talk a lot, you'll hear lots of anglers say that, like, what we love so much about fishing is that it like takes us into places we wouldn't ordinarily go, and it gets us thinking and looking about things you wouldn't ordinarily have an excuse to be thinking or about or looking at or whatever. I certainly feel that way. I think that's true, but it's also very singularly focused fishing. Yes, it may take you into an area that you wouldn't otherwise go, but then all you're really focused on when you're in that area is the water and the fish. And it's not to say that we weren't hyper focused on the water and the fish, because we had an objective here, which was a film revolving around fish, and things weren't going well. So we were certainly thinking about those things, but we were forced to have to give up on them at a lot of points during this trip. And so it had the opposite effect, where now we were kind of forced to experience things in a way that we wouldn't normally be doing if we were fishing. When you can't fish, maybe you just take a stroll out and check out the trees and the birds and the bugs, or sit on the bank and watch the water go by in a completely different way, or whatever, enjoy each other's company, or just watch the clouds pass, or, it allowed us, I think, to open our eyes and be receptive to other things that if the fishing was on, we would have missed, because we would have just been staring at flies on the water the whole time, which I think is good. It's a good exercise and a reminder. And, Aimee famously likes to say that I'm more fish crazed than she is, but it's true. And I think you're pretty good about this in practice already. I'm sure everyone knows an angler like this who's like happy if the fishing isn't good, or if she catches a fish, the fishing is good, whatever, to just like stop and go sit on the bank and take it all in, as opposed to just focusing on the fish in the water the whole time. You do that anyway in life, but the rest of us were forced to kind of match your speed on this trip, because it didn't matter how much we were staring at the water, the fish weren't going to be there. So yeah, I enjoyed that aspect.
Jason and I were like, well, it's muddy, but like maybe they'll eat a streamer or a worm.
I'm just like, I'm
We're gonna
not
go
even
fish.
bringing a rod. Like, I'm good.
I'm staying in the camper.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just cool. You get to, middle of the day, maybe we all just take a nap, enjoy the sound of the rain on the tin roof of the camper and whatever. Yeah, it forced us to slow down a little bit. And a lot of people will say, like, what I love so much about fishing is that it forces you to slow down. But I think...
Well, I think it's fishing filmmakers.
Right.
Like...
You're always
You might be
going.
out there fishing, and for some people it feels like you're slowing down, but like for us, in a lot of ways, it can be work, and it's a fast-paced thing where you're constantly on and trying to...
Right.
Like it doesn't feel slow at all, at least in my experience.
It is very easy to move fast. I think like we
Sure.
all fish small creeks a lot of times, so we're very keen on like if they're not eating in first couple casts, keep moving, And when you're making a film, you do have to slow down a little bit. And I find the times that I am fishing too fast are the times when I get frustrated, the times when I get tangled, the times when I'm not actually fishing the water well. When I'm like more intentional and actually walking up the creek, not falling on the rocks because I'm trying to get to the next spot, that's when it happens.
Right.
All right, so it feels kind of funny talking about all this stuff because we've been here for the last couple of days working on this film, right? And so we've been sitting in the edit, looking through all the footage, listening back to all the interviews, a lot of which we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Which has been really funny. But what do y'all think about this experience so far of the collaboration? Obviously, we're not done with the film yet. When you guys are listening to this, the film is out, and you should go check it out. But we're not quite there yet. But what's been your perspective, or the things about this process that you've like enjoyed, has been eye opening, or the things that like, oh, we do this differently? Just curious to hear y'all's perspective so far.
I was going to turn it over to you, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I know you were really looking forward to this project.
Mm-hmm.
Between you and I, I'm primarily the driving force in the sort of like storytelling side of our films. You're a major part of those films, but in terms of the creative, I don't know, the primary storytelling ideas come from me in our films. And in this project, it's not one of my films or my ideas. It's this big collaborative thing. We're kind of all taking equal shares in it. So I know you were excited to just have a bigger hand in telling a story. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because so much of the storytelling in our films happens in your head, it makes it very hard for me to be a part of that. So there's a lot of times where I don't necessarily feel as creatively involved. And I feel like collaborating on this film, for me, is the first time, that I'm working in like a collaborative position in general, just like with creative projects. But I mean, Chase and I are like always collaborating in a way, I guess, but for me, it feels more like we are one thing, rather than like two creative people coming together.
Right.
But especially in the editing process for this film, it was really exciting for me to be able to look at a story and like find that story and bring that to life through the edit, like in a more physical way. Like, we have Post-it notes and boards.
You
and
probably see it right
like
behind me.
writing things down, and we're all sitting and working together and like getting feedback from all of us is like, we're cutting things and we're going through interviews, and it's way more hands-on than I ever have been on a story like this or a film like this. And I think for me, it's just like a huge point to learn and a huge point for growth. And for Chase and I moving forward, like, I know that I've expressed interest in wanting to be more involved in the creative decisions and the process in our film. So I think it's just a big step in the right direction for me to be more creatively involved and just to like, I don't know, stretch that muscle a little bit more than I normally would. Obviously I have a ton to learn about video editing, so it can be a little intimidating, and approaching it also like from a group standpoint with all of us, it feels a little easier to like throw my opinion in there, and get feedback from multiple people too. It's been really fun so far.
Yeah, and I should say for people too, it's not like you're not allowed to be involved in the creative process in the films that we make. The you know, Aimee,
Something not allowed. Yeah.
Aimee and I, you know, are two people working, living, running a business together. Our films take a lot of time to make. There's a lot of time spent in the editing studio, and kind of the only way so far that we've been able to keep our lives running is that if I've got a long time that I've got to be spent on my computer doing nothing else but editing, Aimee's in charge of taking care of a ton of other stuff that we need to do to keep this ship running, you know. And Aimee also is an incredibly talented and renowned photojournalist. You've got all sorts of other projects that you're working on all the time and stuff too. So for this project in particular, we just set aside the time where like we're not really doing anything else but this. You know, the goal is like, this is just production week. Everyone is all hands on deck. So it's been a unique opportunity for you to just sort of take everything else off your plate and just be focused on editing, and for all of us to just be focused on editing and storytelling. And I think there is a lot that we can take away from that and try to incorporate back into our own process on our own. But
I think Scotty too, like, we've spent enough time around you. Obviously, like, people know that like we're super slow putting out videos. You have a better system in place.
I wouldn't say better. I would just say different.
Or a different system in place. And I think it's been eye-opening for both of us in a lot of ways. I mean, not to speak for you, but at least for me, to like set better boundaries, maybe. To have like we start work at this time and like we're gonna stop at this time. And it's not that it's like a hard in and out every day, but to give yourself a little more space to have thoughts about projects, and to like to not overwhelm yourself with so much work, because like Chase and I, 11:30 at night, and it's like, should we stop working? Like, probably should have stopped working like 6 hours ago. I don't know. You know, like we're just like kind of always burning the candle at both ends, it feels like, and we're still like, you know, not struggling, but like kind of struggling to get our films out and get things out into the world, because we're just, everything is such a deep, I don't know, intensive process. But it's been really great to not be thinking about any of the other things that are on our plate. This is like what we're here to do. We are waking up, getting into work stuff, having all these conversations and time, taking small breaks, going outside. Like, I don't know. It sounds like really simple to be sitting here and saying it, like, duh. Like, yeah, that's like normal life. But it's like, it can be really hard to take those breaks and to give yourself that space to like really just kind of like daydream and think about stuff. And like, you know, I'll be laying in bed and think like, oh, like tomorrow, like we should talk about this with the film, or like just like random ideas popping into your head. It's been so different than any other filmmaking process that I've been involved in so far. I don't know if that was like pretty rambly, but
no, that's good. I
don't know. Taking the time, giving yourself the space to like, I don't know. It sounds simple, but it's not.
I think last year when we did 130 miles and Will and I did a production week like this, it was really eye-opening, because like you guys, I'm usually working by myself in my room on the computer, right? And like you're so in the edit sometimes that you forget to like, it's so easy to be too deep into it and you forget to like step back. And I think this has been really good, because like there's been times when we originally were just going to all three be like working at the same time, but we've essentially like decided
immediately just like did not do that.
No.
we were like, this is how we're going to do it. Actually, never mind.
Like, we decided to essentially like have one computer up and we're all around it and we're collaborating, right? We're like, we all have different perspectives on what's going on. Chase and I have switched off on like who's running the computer, and the couple times when I've been off of the computer, it's been really, like, I really enjoyed it because sometimes I'm so in the edit and like so caught on like, oh, this
yeah,
one
you're
little,
getting back into like all the normal ways that you will like go into films. You're getting like hyper focused.
Yeah, you're
on
too
one
hyper
thing.
focused. But I've been able to like look at the story and be like, what? Oh, I understand what he's doing there. How is this going to fit into the overarching story? And then we have our board here that we're following.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I just sit here and like just listening to the audio, just like close my eyes, listen to the audio, and like replay it back. You know, like it's just been nice to sort of like engage a bunch of different senses in this process too. Like, listening.
Yeah, it's like working different creative muscles too. Because I think for a long time I thought editing was just like filmmaking was just editing. It's just you sit in the computer, you're in Premiere, and you put clips in front of each other, you add some music, and boom, you have a video. But a lot of things that we've done has been analog, where we've looked at the footage and we're talking, we're writing stuff out on Post-it notes, like how does this fit into here? How does this fit into there? And you're like thinking differently than you would. So
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed.
It's funny
that.
how like, you know, we have these Post-it notes with these ideas on them that are following the storyline, and how like physically just moving a Post-it note can like rearrange all of this thinking in your brain, and you have to like reassess where we're going. And like it doesn't seem like something like just moving a piece of paper should really make that much of a difference or like signal that much of a change in your brain, but it does like really help to process all this stuff and to think about it differently and to think about different perspectives and different angles and just find that storyline and explore other options there too.
I think something that you had said too that resonated is focusing on one thing. I think that's been something that I've definitely recognized is an important thing with anything in life, but especially filming. You cannot be doing 4 things well at a time. So the fact that we're able to our only goal of this week is working on this project and trying to get as much done as we can, has really allowed us to make a lot of progress. And way more progress than if either of us were doing this solo, you know. So, and it's cool to like talk about the creative problems that you guys face as creators and filmers, and how you handle them versus like, oh, you know, I didn't think about that, or.
Well, it's so funny, like both of you sitting down in Premiere and then being like, oh, what's like a hotkey for this? And like, how do you do this? Oh, you do it this way? Like, what? And then like the same thing for you being like, wait, what did you just do? Like, that's so much quicker. You know, like finding like weird little tricks and tips and stuff that like, you know, both of you have been using Premiere for a long time. You've been editing that program for seemingly forever, and you still can learn new things. Yeah. It's cool. It's cool to see how other people are doing stuff, especially for me being like so new to video editing. It's like it's a pretty clean slate, I think. So it's just lots of growth, lots of learning. Yeah,
that's sweet. Is there anything that's been a turn off in this whole process, or anything been like, oh, this is
no, we're in a pretty swanky Airbnb. Yeah. So like it was pretty nice. If anything, I'm like, we need to do this for all of our projects. We need to like dedicate an entire week to like production week, and then I don't know.
Yeah, it's been great. Only Scotty falling asleep before we can finish watching movies at the end of the workday. Whoops.
No, it's been like, I really can't think of like any complaint. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's been great.
Sick. And no complaints about putting sauce on napkins or anything?
Well, we have a lot of like dishes here, and we're going to step in if anything goes haywire where Scotty needs to put sauces on a napkin in like large quantities. But yeah, no, it's been good. What about for you? Like, how has this experience been for you? It must be, obviously you've done it before with Will, but now you have 2 people you're working with different opinions or similar opinions, or, you know, what has it been like for you?
I've been stoked, like the whole thing. For so long, the YouTube thing felt like you're alone on an island trying to figure things out, trying to solve problems by yourself, and you're just like, who do I go to? I have no one else to go to about these things. So this whole process has felt like a team thing. Like, you did a lot of the heavy lifting up front for the logistics of this trip, and obviously the permitting, like handling all of that. So then when we came into the trip, you know, I just don't think I could have done anything else that I had this summer to like keep wildfly going or whatever.
Right.
We were able to divvy up tasks essentially,
Mhm.
which is nice. And especially here having, I think, a third person like in the room instead of like just me and Will. There's something about a third opinion in the room.
Oh, totally.
Well, I think it's
that-
really easy to just like agree with the other person. Like
Yeah.
not even like on purpose. It's like in a subconscious level where you're just like, yeah, that sounds right. I don't know. I think
Well, yeah.
I'm like looking for those moments where like, do we need to like analyze this a little bit more heavily?
either you're able to offer. Well, I think obviously, you know, everyone's different, but also.
Yeah, I'm not saying like everyone just agrees with the person when there's
No,
only two
no, no,
people
no,
in the
no,
room.
no,
but-
no, no. What I was going to say is that, you know, everyone has different opinions, but I think your opinions generally are going to be more divergent from Scotty and I's,
Mm.
just from the fact that you're
I'm
a lady.
not like the primary
Well, no,
filmmaker
just-
editor.
Just that you're a lady. You think
Mhm.
differently. Your life is different. Your experiences are different. So you offer a completely different creative voice in that sense. So on the one hand, you offer a unique third perspective, but then also it's just really good to have like, if there's a disagreement, there's like a tiebreaker. Also,
Right.
you know, a third person. If like two
Yeah.
people are like, well, I'm thinking maybe this, and the other person's like, I'm thinking that. It's like, what do you think? And you know, if you lean one way or the other, it's like, all right, okay, I guess that is probably the way to go. Or, you know, like I said, the opposite. Scotty and I might both feel strongly about something, even if it's wrong, just because, you know, we're
Mhm.
more likely to have the same opinion over you. So we might both be looking at something being like, well, I don't really understand why this isn't working, but I don't know how else to do it. And then you're like,
Yeah.
well, why don't you just do it this way? Oh,
Yeah,
duh,
and
of
I
course
think
we could do it
you're,
that way.
Like, because you're newer to video editing, you know, Chase and I can sometimes be like stuck in the weeds on stuff that does
Yeah,
not have
for
anything
sure.
to do with the story. We're just like so caught up in a technical issue that you're like, dudes, this is like, that's fine. Or we don't need that. We're like, oh, we
Yeah.
don't need that. That's going to save us 30 minutes of thinking about this.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you're free.
you're free. Yeah, you haven't been cursed by Premiere. Don't go down
Yeah.
that. Get on DaVinci.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was I gonna say?
You have to pee again?
No, I don't. I don't have to pee again. So what I was gonna say is, this whole project I've been really excited to, like, showcase more of you guys as like your personalities
Mhm.
from my perspective, because I mean, you know, you guys show that in your films, but a lot of your videos are very voiceover heavy, you know, and a lot of times, Chase, you're behind the camera, and so I feel like there's a cool collaboration in styles that is going to come out of this film, that it's going to be like sometimes the rough and run and guns like wildfly stuff mixed with high production storytelling and hopefully high production graphics, like really good just overall imagery. I think that collaboration and that combination is going to be really cool. So I've been like throughout the whole project, even telling Will going into this, I was like, this is what I really want to capture, is like who you guys are. And I think we've done that. So I'm really excited as this edit develops and the film. I mean, people who are listening to this, it's out, but as it comes together,
Yeah.
I'm like really excited for that part of it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that sometimes gets missed in some of your videos because it's also you,
Yeah.
right? So you're always going to be more, I'm saying this because it's the same way. You're going to be like more insecure about stuff, or like maybe
right,
cut
yeah,
stuff out.
yeah. We stay within our creative comfort zones, whatever those may be, and for us, that's a very curated storytelling experience. Less of the off the cuff personal stuff, just because of how our personalities are and the way we are and whatever, you know, that's less comfortable for us, whereas for you that's much more your comfort zone, and then
Which is like immediately evident when we're like out there and Chase and I are like absolutely dread, like, oh my god, am I gonna have to talk to the camera, like, are we gonna do this? And then Scotty just like busts out the camera. He's like, hey everybody, like, this is totally normal, there's a bunch of people around me and I'm just talking like everything's totally fine. And I'm like, what? How does this guy
Amy,
do
don't put me up on a
this?
pedestal. I'm not that good.
How does this guy do this? Like, oh god, I'm like sweating. Like, this is so uncomfortable. But Scotty's just like cool as cucumber over there. Not uncomfortable because like you're awkward, but like for me, if I was gonna do that, I'd just be like, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, same
It's
goes
not my
like
comfort zone.
comfort zone too. For a lot of times, I'm just like, yeah, that's good enough. Let's get it and let's move on. Whereas I felt like this trip, there were certain times where we took the time to like
Yeah.
set up a good frame, and you and Will were very intentional about like, no, this is like, let's put it on the gimbal or let's
Yeah.
switch lenses, and I think there's a good balance there to like be learned for both of us.
Totally.
Right? Like there's certain
Yeah.
times when it's like story overshot, and there's other times where it's get a good image. Just make sure this
Yeah.
image hits. So then we don't have to shoot 10 of them. We just shoot one good one.
Right. Yeah, totally. I agree.
So, but yeah, anyways, that's my rant. I hope that comes through in the film.
Yeah, we're getting it, Scotty. We're getting it.
it, dude. I'm also really excited about this project. Obviously, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to turn out to be, but this is the first film that we've ever decided to sell over a paywall. And, I think that added some pressure going into this with the trip because we wanted to make sure it's worth people's money to spend to watch this film. This will eventually go on YouTube at some point, but I thought it'd be a really cool way to give people early access and like have one big film for the year. We're doing a pay what you think is fair model, so you can literally pay 99 cents up to whatever you want. And I think I'm just curious to see how the fans respond and the community, supports the film, because we're obviously in an interesting economic time, and we're in a very small industry that doesn't have a lot of budget to throw around. And so, at this point of recording this podcast, we have received 0 sponsor dollars. This has been completely self-funded.
Correct.
And, we're hoping that people support it. But I think at the end of the day, it's like we're still stoked for the experience to be able to collaborate and learn and have new perspectives and just like have the life experience of this. So I don't know. It's been really fun to have you guys along for that side of things.
Yeah, totally. And because we're in the past right now,
Yeah.
I actually
What dimension are we in?
It's late August, by the way.
Yeah, because we're in the past, it's ad free, right, behind the paywall. Yeah, there won't be any ads. So, part of the economic model that we operate off of to be able to like fund films, and for anyone watching, it's not that much from AdSense on YouTube, but it's at least something.
But you make money from YouTube, right?
Yeah, it's not
But
not
you're
enough to
YouTubers.
single-handedly fund any of these projects, but it certainly provides some income. You got to sit through and watch these stinking ads, to get through stuff. It's sort of the unfortunate truth. We don't want to have to put ads on anything. We want people to be able to watch our work all the way through. So I think it's a pretty good deal that, for whatever you think is fair, you get to watch this film ad-free. So yeah, that's the switch we're trying to make here to see if that's viable. Can we do it another way? Can we do it without corporate America sucking the blood from your veins to be able to watch a fly fishing film?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's good for people to know that whoever does decide to buy the film and watch it early before it's on YouTube, they're supporting us. Like,
Yeah, like directly.
this was a small
Right.
team
Yeah.
that put this thing together.
Yeah.
We are not, maybe numbers and like our subscriber count grows. It seems like it's a bigger entity than it is, but at the end of the day, it's a very small team that we're operating off of. And a lot of the times we're taking pay cuts compared to
Mhm.
the normal, our friends in different industries, because this is something that we love so
Yeah.
much, and to be able to share it in a creative and true way, I think also is one of the coolest things about this, because there really aren't any sponsors on it.
Yeah, there's just
It is
we have full control.
completely full control.
Yeah.
So that's been really exciting. And this is not available yet when you're listening to this, but in the spring, when this video comes out on YouTube, we have designed a merch line, a collab merch line that Chase actually designed himself. We've got a bunch of really cool items coming out that I'm very,
we were
excited.
all a part of it. I was, the hand that drew the imagery, but the three brains came together to create that imagery for sure.
Yeah, but I'm really excited for that. It's like it's the first collab merch line we've done too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's cool to get a different artist's perspective and something that was more geared towards like this exact trip that we're on.
Yeah, and it's cool too because we've never like, well, not never, but for the most part, we haven't like made the time to make any merch ourselves because we've just been so busy with other stuff. But I know tons of our shared audience and our audience have always been looking for more merch that has us in it in some way, has our name on it or our designs on it, and it was great to have an excuse to like make the time to do that. So, yeah, in lieu of Tight Loops merch, we've got something even better. We've got double whammy Tight Loops / Wildfly merch
Hell
available coming soon. So excited about that.
Yeah, you'll see it in the film. Getting to use some of the gear, which was sick.
Yeah. If the audience, if you guys are interested in seeing more collaborations between the two of us, this whole thing is kind of like one big experiment. We're experimenting with the platform, we're experimenting with the format, we're doing stuff we haven't done before with this project. It's all kind of a big test to see how it goes and how successful it is. So, there's a lot of you out there who have been asking for collaboration between us. We've got a lot of mutual fans and audience. So, if you want to keep seeing us do more projects, which we're hoping to continue to do more collaborations, at least, one a year or something, definitely check this film out, buy the merch, support, whatever.
Yeah, let us know somehow because that feedback is really important.
Yeah, because I'm not saying we're going to stop being friends or stop making films if this
it's
completely
up to you.
tanks.
It's completely up to you.
But,
You're our fate.
The incentive to keep making films like this together if this is a total
Scotty,
flop,
and Wildfly and Tight Loops Fly continue to be friends. Only time will tell.
Wild Loops on the fly, baby.
Yeah, and same also if for supporters of Phelps on the Fly also, because he's a part of this too.
Yes, go subscribe to Phelps' channel, Phelps on the Fly, on YouTube. He's killing it. He's on the come up. Yeah. I'm telling you, he's gonna pop off.
I'm gonna be optimistic.
Who knows where he'll be at by the time this comes out?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm gonna be optimistic and say that this is all gonna be a great success, and the four of us, including Will, are all gonna keep collaborating on stuff.
Yeah.
Far into the future, but yeah, if that's something you guys want to see, if that's something you like, definitely support. If nothing else, by the time this gets to YouTube, just support with your eyeballs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Share with your friends, like.
Right.
If you enjoy it, share with your mom, share with your dad, your uncle, your aunt, whoever else. I think too the collaboration is just it was like we wanted to do this anyways. We just happened to we're experimenting with this model of a paywall, and because we wanted to make it as good as it could be. It really comes down to we want to make the project in the film as good as it can be.
Totally.
Yeah.
I should say it's not like a threat that if you don't go and buy this film, we'll never make another one again. If you really hate this format, let us know that too. We'll figure out something else to do. But that was the goal with the whole thing, is to take full creative freedom and control into our hands, make the film we want to make as opposed to the film we're able to make, with whatever resources. So, that's the hope, is that doing it this way was going to allow us to make the best film we could make, and we're doing our best to make the best film we can make. I think everyone's going to love it. Hopefully you guys are going to love it. Hopefully you're about to go watch it right now, or you've just watched it, or whatever.
Or you've already left the podcast because you're watching it.
That's right.
You're like, these people are rambling. I'm just going to go watch it.
Was there anything that we've cut out of this film that was a funny moment, or anything that you guys remember that is definitely not making the film from the trip?
I feel like all the things that I thought were funny better be in the bloopers or some behind the scenes or something, because Scotty not safely ejecting his hard drive for the past 2 years, and you deleting that queue of warnings on your laptop was a real highlight, and I feel like that needs to be in there. But yeah, I don't know, there's Scotty, I'm sorry, there was just a lot of you. A lot of funny memories.
You're getting all of me.
I don't even. Is there footage of the sauce on the napkin? It's such a vivid memory in my brain that I feel like there's video footage, but I don't know that there is.
There is. I can't remember if it's on a phone.
Because you're scraping it into the
into the bowl.
The ramekin I gave you.
Can I just give my case at least?
I guess.
We're in the camper. I don't know where y'all's dishes
We're in the
are.
camper, also known as my house,
Yes.
which has utensils and plates and bowls and things of a kitchen.
Well, I had been living out of a camp bowl, Aimee, all week. So I'm like, you got to come to where I'm at, you know? I know this is your home, but it's not my home.
Okay.
But anyways, I don't see a bowl, and I want some barbecue sauce for my chicken. And so there's paper towels there. I'm like, I've done this before. You just put some sauce in your paper towels. It's just like the little cups at Wendy's, you know?
Except it has no sides. It's just flat.
It's hard to
and
call
made
a sheet of paper a cup, but
But okay. Anyways.
But I didn't see any bowls, so I just put it on there, and I was like, I can just dip
Ladies
my
and
chicken
gentlemen,
out of it.
he did not put a small amount of sauce on a napkin or a paper towel. He put a large amount of barbecue sauce, and it was heavy. It was a full palm hold. So I feel like we're gonna need them to settle the debate of whether or not this is acceptable behavior.
although, kudos to him. When we called him out on it, he just dribbled that sauce off the
He
napkin
just
onto a
scraped
plate.
it back into a bowl.
Yeah, probably full of napkin fibers and whatever else. But yeah, he ate it like
Fiber.
a man.
Yeah.
That was great. That was a great success.
Yeah, I think a lot of the funny stuff. There's lots of. We captured a lot of it, but there's only so much. You're telling a story. It can't just all be hijinks.
Yeah.
But
There's also a lot of things that only we will understand.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's a lot of
But-
hijinks that just sort of happens in all the waiting we had sitting around camp, waiting for the weather to change, hanging out in the camper, etc. There's lots of funny stuff, and I assume we haven't finished the film yet. I assume a lot of it's in there, but there's plenty of it. You can't include it all because it just sort of changes the story you're trying to tell. Obviously, for us, I know we've been cracking up this week in the edit booth, bay, house, whatever we're calling it, the edit house.
Island.
Listening to Will behind the camera. Will's a really, really funny guy, and I'm not always sure if he's deliberately being funny or he's just naturally funny when he's being himself. But there's great color commentary behind the camera when we're filming. He's got a handful of phrases and sort of like positive affirmations he gives. You can hear him behind the camera a lot of times be like, yes, Scotty, good, Scotty, nice one, Scotty,
Yeah.
we're getting it,
We're
dude,
getting
we're
it.
getting it.
And Scotty is 40 feet away.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
no,
Scotty
yeah.
can't hear
He's-
any of this positive
He's talking to
reinforcement.
himself. He's not
Yeah.
talking to Scotty. That stuff's
It's just
been really
little
funny.
treats for us as we're
Little
going
nuggets.
through that.
Yeah, some of the phrases, are just so funny, and hopefully a lot of that stuff should also be in. If you've seen the film and you're not aware, we have a behind the scenes film that'll have a lot of extra kind of funny stuff, like that production stuff that you wouldn't see in the story in front of the camera that was happening behind the camera. So definitely check that out too. And maybe there's a blooper reel in the film. I don't know. We haven't
don't know yet.
we haven't gotten that
Maybe.
far
Yeah,
yet.
yeah.
But maybe in the credits there'll be some of that funny
We're
stuff
asking
too.
people to buy the film. We're not even done with it yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's gonna be great, I swear.
I swear. It's happening.
Guys, it's good already. Okay, it's good already.
Yeah.
We're off to a great start.
It's so funny with Will too. Like the commentary behind the camera is we all do this because we're all anglers. So when you're filming something like fly fishing, you want them to catch fish. You're stoked
Right.
as the cameraman, and the cameraman a lot of times in our videos becomes a character. Someone hooks, you're like, oh, you hear that from the camera,
Yeah.
dude,
Right.
because he's just as stoked as the angler to be witnessing it. And it's been cracking me up, just some of Will's commentary that he probably didn't even realize he was saying.
Yeah, totally.
He's just so stoked. Oh, we got the shot. Let's go. Dude, we're getting it. and then we just get a cool shot.
Yeah. Something else that happened shooting interviews, our closeout interviews. I'm sure someone's going to get on our case for bad practices here of what we were doing.
It's don't.
We're
don't
trying
talk about
we're
this.
trying to make the best out of a situation. If you're the rancher who owns the land that we were adjacent to when we were filming this, and you're listening to this, I'm sorry. All right, we did the best we could, but we're sitting there filming interviews off the side of the road.
In
and-
BLM land, like middle of nowhere.
Yeah, BLM land, but it's open grazing, and there's cattle fencing around and cattle guards. There's free range cows sort of moving around, and somehow these cows are sort of encroaching on us. We're pretty close to where the road crosses a
There's
cattle
straight
guard.
up like 30 cows lined up just staring us down.
Right, and we're right next to a cattle guard. For people who aren't out west who aren't familiar with this, it's
The cows are
a steel grate that goes over and has fencing on either side that goes over the road. Generally, the spacing in the grate is so that cows' feet would fall into it, and they're scared to cross it. So it allows cars to cross through gates or fences that are keeping cattle in one place, but not the cattle to cross. Somehow these cows get across the cattle guard.
well, like
two or three
one
of them.
cow.
2 cows
Yeah,
get
yeah.
across.
Yeah,
They just beast across. And
yeah.
all the other ones are like sad now.
Well, and they're getting kind of cagey. The other ones are starting to approach, and they're starting to stick their hooves onto it, and they're
Yeah.
slipping in and kind of, getting dangerously close to breaking an ankle or something. Out of concern, Aimee goes over and opens up the right there. There's an area of the gate that you can open that's just
Yeah.
loosely sort of tied with wire. It's designed for ranchers to be able to, whoever's in charge of those cows, whoever owns those cows,
Yeah,
and,
move them
to move them around from pasture to pasture so that they can graze freely. Aimee opens it up so that they can be reunited. And we think at the time that this group of cows is the entirety of the group. It's like 20 cows or something. We're like, well, maybe they're not supposed to be on this side of the fence today, but some of them got over there, and we can't exactly pick them up and put them back over, and we can't control. We'll just reunite them. Like that seems like because
Well,
we're
I don't
here.
want to watch one break its ankle.
Right,
like
right, because
they're
we're
trying
here.
to cross the cattle guard. They're getting stuck. It's like
Yeah, that's the
was a little
responsible
tense.
thing to do. So we open it up, they cross over, cool. We close it back up, we go back to our interviews. Half an hour later, more cows come over the hill from the original place that the first cows came from. We now realize, okay, that wasn't the whole group. There's more to this group, and they're now incredibly distraught that their friends are on the opposite side of the cattle guard and fence. And they've sort of moved down a little bit at this point. They're up against the actual barbed wire fence. Now we've got two groups of cows
They're
with
all
a barbed
like
wire
screaming
fence
at each other.
between each other, trying to figure out how to get to each other, to the point where the cows that we've led over to our side are now trying to jump over the barbed wire. And they're getting kind of like caught up in the barbed wire. Now we have a different
babies
problem.
are getting stuck in the fence.
First, we thought these cows are going to break their ankles. Now we're concerned that they're going to slit their guts open on, barbed wire fence, trying to jump over it and getting stuck or something. So we're like, oh my God, we got to herd them back over here. We're going to do the
they're
job
kind
of
of heading
cattle
back up
dog and
towards
rancher.
The cattle
so
guard and the fence and where we let them in. So I'm thinking, let's get them all back to where they're supposed to be. We'll pretend like none of this ever happened. We're just going to get these cows back on the
Yeah.
side they're supposed to be on. I'm going to close the fence and we're going to leave.
So Aimee opens up the fence. The cows are, 20, 30 yards away. We're like, we'll just herd them over. This will be easy. Me, Scotty, and Will are like, we'll just go
In
get
our
around
bedrocks.
below 'em. Yeah, in our bedrocks in this giant open rocky field. And we're just going to push them up just by proximity. The cows will get spooked, and we'll push them towards. They'll have to funnel through that
Because, of
little
course,
space.
rain is coming in.
Yeah, rain's
And we need to
coming
leave.
in.
We need to get to
Leave.
camp before it gets too dark.
Anyway, our inexperience in herding cattle comes out very quickly. We don't get down far enough below them, so we just start spooking them farther away from the open gate. We're sprinting. I thought I was going to have a heart attack, to be honest. I was sprinting so fast to try and get the jump on these cows to get around below them. We commented afterwards, this is why cowboys ride horses, to be able to do this type of work. We were in sandals on foot. We completely failed. In the end, the cows got far enough away from the fence and each other because we caused such mayhem running around trying to herd them that at least the immediate threat of them hurting themselves on the fence was gone. So we just left the cattle fence open. And we left. All right. We figured they'd figure it out on their own eventually. Whatever side of that fence they needed to get on to, they'd be reunited without an obstruction in their way. So,
And I mean, I kind of looked at it as at least the rancher will know some sort of kerfuffle happened.
right.
over
Anyone
here.
who shows
The
up will
fence
see
is
right
open,
away
so
that
your
the
cows
fence is
might be
open
on
and
either side.
they'll fix the problem. So, look,
we tried to make,
it was good
a
intentions.
good judgment there.
We
but
were
it
trying to
was-
help these dang stupid cows, and in the end, we probably made it a way bigger mess than it needed to be. But only in Wyoming. That was all part of the experience.
The true cowboy experience right
yeah,
there.
that's right.
We tried to be cowboys, we failed.
I was worried about
we
them.
found out we ain't no cowboys, boys and girls. So
That was like mid-interview. We're just like, you're getting interviewed, and I remember being like, well, a cow just entered the frame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to do something about this.
Yeah. It was a thing.
Also, something that now reviewing the footage, it's really funny. There's a scene where Chase and I try to go out and fish when the water's muddy at one point.
Mhm.
And, I'm like, I'm going to start catching fish on dry dropper. Like, this is perfect. The water's coming down. Like, it's going to be great. And I was like so zoned in on fishing and so fixated on catching fish. And I was like fishing really hard. And we're both loved up. And we're like, you're fishing a streamer and I'm fishing this dry dropper really hard. We're in like different parts of the river. Not really. We can't really hear each other. We're like making comments here and there. Will's filming both of us. And just the contrast of like where we were at that day is so like Chase is just fucking around, like playing with the streamer. Like all this commentary is super hilarious. And I'm just like fishing. I'm like, dude, get any bites yet? And you're just, yeah, nothing yet, blah, blah. And then we go our separate ways. And watching the footage is so funny. Just like the two different places where we were at.
Yeah, I knew right away that we weren't going to have much success. It only took one cast, but I really admired your exuberance and dedication. I was like, oh man, these kids, you go for it, Scotty. You fish
Yeah,
hard,
The 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm back in the truck. I'm like, no, I'm good.
Yeah, Aimee didn't even come out at all. To
Yeah.
give you an idea of what the conditions were like, Aimee didn't even bother suiting up to come to
I
the
was
water.
checking weather forecasts.
Yeah.
I remember moving downstream from you and Will had decided to like sit down on the bank and
Yeah.
just chill.
Just enjoy
I was
the.
like, they freaking gave up. I'm gonna show these boys. I didn't get shit. And I come back up there and they're just like, oh, was it? I'm like,
Did
no.
you have a nice time out there, kiddo?
That was really
Yeah.
funny. Yeah, it's cool. There's so many little moments and like inside jokes that happen on every one of these trips that
Sure. Anyone can relate
just-
to that.
it's sometimes there's things to share and there's other things that are just for us for
Yeah.
those trips. And I feel like I've started to accept that more with the trips. You don't have to share everything.
Right.
Mhm.
Just share enough with the audience to
Yeah.
feel like they're kind of there. But yeah, well, I'm really really stoked for this to come out and to work on this project. I've essentially scheduled out this has been the project of the year.
Right.
For
Same for
me.
us.
Yeah, and I've hired some friends to help with editing, to like open up my whole fall and work on this project. So shout out to those guys for obviously helping and again just wanting to make it the best possible. So I've definitely learned a lot from this collaboration, and I know we've got some really really cool ideas for the future that we'd like to make happen.
Oh, and also, guys,
Guys, what? Gals, what?
no, guys, I'm speaking to the audience. All royal, which is all male, nice. No, guys can refer to gals too. Folks, assuming everything went according to plan, we should be doing some live
Yeah.
events. We should be doing some live
touch on
showings of
that.
this. So
Yeah, I'm excited for the film premieres. We did a couple last year with the Sailboat Diaries with the Blue Line guys and Brian, and that was really fun. Fun to interact with the fans in person, and I think like bring people together to like meet other anglers in our community. Because sometimes it feels like kind of hard to meet people in the fly world, and especially during the winter. What else are you doing in December?
right,
You're not fishing. I'm not. I'm skiing.
yeah,
or I'm sitting inside like drinking hot chocolate.
yeah.
So yeah, hopefully you guys can come out and yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, can't wait to meet everyone and reminisce with you guys about your fishing trips that got derailed by weather.
Yeah,
Hear about everybody else's experiences.
yeah. Big things in the future though. We do have some
Yep.
really cool, bigger projects that we want to plan. Yeah, don't want to say too much.
This is not the last you will see of us.
Correct.
That's right. But thank you guys for listening. Make sure you go over to check out Tight Loops. They've got some new videos that are coming out.
Correct.
More For Wild Sake series and update videos on the films, I should say, on your Baja trip and how the full story on how you guys got the new truck and what happened
Yep.
with Bullwinkle, the old
Yep.
van. So we'll leave links down below. Make sure you guys go check that out, and hopefully you get to watch the film. There'll also be a link below somewhere.
Cool.
Click all the links, baby.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Alrighty, we're gonna go eat
Thanks.
dinner. See you guys.
Bye.